Today I'm going to talk to you about the cup which Jesus cried about in the Garden of Gethsemane. In Luke 22 verse 42, Jesus pleads with God the Father to take this cup from him. We have always assumed that in this cup was the wrath of God. We could not have been further from the truth. What was actually in this cup was something that every human being partakes of uh, freely, and this is the breaking of God's law. Why we misunderstand what was in the cup is because we fail to comprehend how much Jesus loved his Father, in that it would break his heart to commit a sin or to break any part of his Father's word. Now, there were 613 laws which God laid out to Moses, and in particular there's one that interests us. It is the only law which Jesus broke, and the purpose for which he was sent to the cross for. Now, in Deuteronomy 21 verse 22 and 23, God curses a man who hangs on a tree, and we begin to understand that in Galatians 3:13, having hung on a tree, Jesus was not cursed because he had not committed a sin worthy of death. However, though, the man next to him, the one he promises paradise, had committed a sin worthy of death. And funny, if you look at what actually happens after the promise is made, immediately the sun goes out. So we begin to understand that when Jesus died of a broken heart, he died of a broken heart because of something that's even more telling, and it's such a story of love, of mercy, and of grace, that it makes Ephesians 2 verse 8 even more poignant. Jesus says, I promise you today you will be with me in paradise. But the man that he promises this to is a man who is guilty of a sin worthy of death, and thereby tying himself to a man who is guilty of a sin worthy of death. And he weeps in the Garden of Gethsemane, not for the man that he saves, but he weeps for the fact that he breaks his Father's law. And if we knew anything about Jesus, was that he loved his Father to the uttermost. In fact, he himself said the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your might, and which is exactly what he did, beyond our comprehension of how to love God. You see, the average human being cannot love God like that, cannot love God like Jesus did. So having done that, broken his Father's word, this is what then happens to Jesus. His heart breaks, because in that moment when he makes that, he presents his Father with the choice of whether or not to keep his word in the Old Testament, because if Father keeps his word in the Old Testament, he breaks his word in the New Testament. Now, the word which you might be wondering what I'm talking about is when Jesus comes out of the water, and at the Transfiguration, God repeats these words. He says it at the Transfiguration, he says, this is my Son whom I love and in whom I am well pleased. Jesus was not afraid of the cross. That most preachers get absolutely right. He was not afraid of the wrath of God either. That he got absolutely. That's where we go wrong. What he was heartbroken over was the fact that he had to break one of his Father's commands, one of his Father's laws to Moses, which for him, it was as though the command was said to him personally. Now, this is why when this Roman soldier stabs him with the spear to check if he has died, water and blood come out of his heart, because this is the significance of this is actually that Jesus died of a broken heart, but he died of a broken heart because of what he did to his Father's word. Now, he ascends into heaven, his spirit enters into heaven, and he assumes his rightful place as heir to the Father. Read Matthew chapter 12 verse 1 to 11 to understand what I'm talking about, and start relating that to the cross, because you see, in that moment Jesus was glorified.